History 1. This happened at my aunt and uncle's house when I was around 14 or 15 years old. I'm 28 now, but thinking about it still gives me goosebumps. It was nearing the end of my summer break, and my aunt and uncle decided they were going to go on one more camping trip before school started again. My aunt ran a small bakery in town. They gave me the usual rundown of how to reach them, and then they were on their way. They took my uncle's truck since my aunt's car was in the shop. Going out was completely out of the question for me, so I did what any teenage girl would do with an empty house and a fully stocked pantry. I stayed home all weekend, ate junk food, and binged every B horror film my uncle had rented from Netflix. This was back in the mail-order DVD days. It was Saturday night, technically Sunday morning, and I was downstairs on my uncle's leather recliner, bowl of popcorn in hand, eyes glued to the television as I watched The Ring. I had all the lights off to get myself into that horror movie mood. When I needed to go to the bathroom, I didn't want to turn on the lights because I was lazy, so I walked over to the bathroom by the front door and did my business. I didn't bother turning on the bathroom light because, again, I was lazy. As I sat there pondering the plot of The Ring, I looked up at the window that faced the front yard. It's an oval window, and instead of buying curtains for it, my uncle used some of that frosted privacy film. It keeps anyone from looking in, but you can still vaguely see things on the other side. As I zoned out, I noticed something quite odd. There was a shape in the window that looked a lot like a person standing there. Now, the reason I say this was odd was because the front porch lights were off, and there was a shadow because of the street light in front of our house. As my gears were turning, the shadow moved out of sight. It was at that exact moment that I realized that whoever was out there had gotten past the lights without them going off. Like most porch lights, ours were motion sensitive. Actually, they were super sensitive. A leaf falling would set them off. The only way not to make those lights go off was if you went around the side of the house and crawled over the banister. As I came to this realization, I also noticed that this person was standing outside our front door. I awkwardly slid off the toilet, pulled my pants up, and did a military-style crawl to the living room and proceeded to freak out. Whoever this individual was had to have practiced not making the lights go off. Also, there were no cars in the driveway. This was the first time that our driveway was empty, so they probably thought nobody was home. As I lay on the floor, my ears perked up at the sound of someone pacing. Now, I was scared they were going to break in and see a small girl all alone in the house. So I crawled my way to the kitchen, grabbed a phone, and as I did that, the footsteps outside stopped as if someone had left the porch. I turned to look at the front door and realized that the lights hadn't turned on, which meant the person jumped off the side. I looked toward the back door, and my eyes fell upon a window with its blinds raised. You see, we kept these blinds up by the kitchen because of our 2 cats. Those little rascals would destroy the blinds if they couldn't see outside. So I ran over to the window, closed the blinds, and sat on the floor. I had no idea if the person saw me, but if they knew that much about the porch lights, they would know that those blinds were always raised. There was still a glow from the TV, so I didn't see anyone when I ran over, but now I was twice as horrified. I sat there for a bit, straining to hear any movement outside, but I wasn't hearing anything until I heard the porch door shaking. My uncle had put a hook on the porch door so that we could let the cats out without them running away, but most of the time my aunt forgot to hook it closed. The reason I heard the door shake was because of my uncle. He must have locked it the last time he was out there. I was in full panic mode now. 3 things. 1. This person knew how to maneuver past the porch lights. 2. They knew about the uncovered window that I hopefully covered in time. And 3. They knew about the porch door being unlocked 99.9% of the time. Now, while I should have called the police at this time, like a smart person, I actually called my uncle. As the phone rang, I made sure the back door, the garage door, and the front door were all locked. It took a while, but my uncle answered the phone, half pissed and half worried. I told him not to freak out, but that I was freaking out. I told him what was going on. "Why aren't you calling the police? What the—" At this point, I was in my aunt and uncle's room and flicked on all the lights. I was hoping that with the bedroom light on, it would give off the image that an adult was present in the home. He said he would call the neighbors and for me to hang up and call the police. Before I called the police, I casually turned on every light in the house. By casually, I mean I ran around the house like a crazy person. When the police arrived, nobody was found. In fact, I was afraid to open the door to the cop that knocked. I demanded that he show me some form of identification. He showed me his badge, and I called the police station to confirm his identity. The neighbors let my aunt and uncle know that I was safe, and they didn't find whoever was walking around the house. My aunt and uncle drove home right after, and my neighbors stayed with me until they arrived. For the following week, I was horrified to be home alone. I refused to open the blinds for the cats or use the downstairs bathroom. Not to mention, we have woods as our backyard, so I was terrified that whoever it was skulking around the woods. The scariest part was that at the end of the following week, a woman's house was broken into, and she was assaulted. Her husband was out of town on a business trip, and the perp broke into her house through the back door. Just knowing that if I had been asleep, or if they had realized a teenage girl was home alone, I would have had a completely different experience. History 2. Before I tell my story, let me set the scene. It was the summer of 1996, and I was 16 years old. I grew up in a good neighborhood in a typical American university town with my dad. I was a pretty well-behaved kid, did very well in school, didn't smoke or drink. In fact, I didn't even want to go to any parties. I didn't have a boyfriend at the time, but I did have a crush on a guy from school, and I felt pretty sure that he was curious about me too. But I guess we were both shy people. This took place at the end of August, when the light summer nights start to slowly grow darker, and the days get shorter. It was a very hot summer, and all the popular girls would wear these white tight tops to show off their midriffs. One day I bought myself one just to try and see what it was like to be a normal teenage girl. I had those silly shoes on too, the ones that caused many to sprain their ankles during that era. Looking back now, I wonder if it was this outfit that started it all. I began to start getting notes. They were placed in the basket of my bicycle, notes with messages like, "I like your style, baby," and "growing into a woman before my eyes." I didn't tell anyone. I strongly suspected the troublemakers at my school. 2 of them lived close to me, and I thought they were teasing me for changing my style. Teenage logic, you've all been there, right? To show them that I didn't care, I wore my new style all the time. One morning, I noticed that someone had trampled the flowers in the flower beds under several of our windows. I told my dad about it. He was worried that somebody was checking the place out, planning to break in. He asked me to turn on the alarm whenever I was alone. Things had gone missing before, insignificant things, but still, you never know. My dad owned a rather successful business, and to celebrate the 10-year mark, he wanted to treat his employees to a weekend getaway and had booked a place up north. I was used to being home alone sometimes. His work demanded that he'd travel for a week or so, and it wasn't a problem. Again, I was a pretty good kid. Anyway, a few houses down the street lived a couple that we knew, and they usually checked in on me if I was alone for a few days. They had no kids of their own and often helped out with everyone else's. It was on a Saturday that it happened. I arrived home very late on my bicycle after having watched Cutthroat Island at a friend's place. I walked in the front door and noticed a draft. Had I forgotten to close the window before I left? I then noticed that the alarm was turned off. Had I forgotten about that too? I walked through the house into the living room when suddenly Mr. Thompson, the man from down the street, stood in front of me. "Hi there, kiddo. Did I scare you?" "I just came to check in on you," he said. I found this strange since it was well past 1 a.m. He smelled of alcohol. "I'm fine, Mr. Thompson. I'll be going off to bed now." Despite it being a hot summer night, I felt a chill crawl down my back. Something inside of me told me that this was an extremely dangerous situation. Something about him was off. It was as if he was wearing a mask, as if somebody else was behind those eyes. Not the friendly Mr. Thompson that I had known my entire life. "Wine?" he said, and nodded in the direction of a bottle. I shook my head, no. I don't drink. My dad, you know." I tried to sound normal, but my voice didn't feel like my own. "Oh, you're almost a grown woman now. You can do as you wish, he continued, pouring wine into an unwashed glass. I've been watching you. You've really grown. He kept telling me how beautiful I'd become, and now he noticed my new clothes, that surely I knew were an open invitation to men. I'm a nice person, don't you think? I'll be good to you. You can trust me. I'll be real gentle. I started to back toward the front door, but he stopped me by grabbing hold of my upper arm and pulling me towards him. Hey, don't be like that. Nobody likes a tease. When I tried to break free, he laughed and said, You want to play, huh? I can play. He then began to shake me. I felt how much stronger he was than I, and I realized I had to make him let go long enough for me to run. At this point, it was as if I was somebody else, and I began saying and doing things that I wasn't even aware of until afterward. Yeah, I like to play, I heard myself say. He smiled and began to caress my hair. We made our way to my dad's bedroom, and I tried to pretend to be into it. The moment he tossed me down, I said, Go lock the front door and turn on the alarm. I tried to look eager and not scared out of my mind. Okay, don't move, he said as he walked away. I was on my feet faster than I thought possible and locked the bedroom door from the inside. My plan, however, had not turned out as I had hoped. He had taken me to my dad's bedroom, not my bedroom. My bedroom had a window that led out to the roof of the garage. From there, I could have jumped down, but my dad's room had no such escape. But it did have a phone. My brain had forgotten the number to the police. Remember that this is in the USA, not Sweden. It isn't 911. The only other number I remembered was my dad's work number. When I called it, he answered almost right away. My dad immediately called the cops from his other phone while I still had him on the line. Mr. Thompson was trying to pick the lock with a screwdriver, shouting at me and promising to gut me like a fish. My dad also called another neighbor, Mr. Kelly, who used to be in the military, and would often brag about how he would treat any burglar to a trip to the emergency room if he ever got the chance. Mr. Kelly arrived before the police, and he didn't break his promise. But the sound of fighting outside the room was terrible, and I had no idea who was on the winning side. Mr. Kelly was older but very fit. But what if Mr. Thompson had a weapon? I don't think I even breathed until I heard Mr. Kelly say, Hey kid, are you okay? I didn't dare leave that room before the police arrived. I was almost unable to move. It was as if my mind had escaped my body. A man who I'd known since childhood had suddenly started to stalk me and planned to use the fact that my dad was out of town to do God knows what to me. I trusted him, and I had been so wrong. I still have trust issues to this day. I spoke to Mr. Thompson's wife once, long after this incident. She filed for divorce and told me that the reason she refused to have children with him was that deep down, she knew they would not have been safe in their home. Mr. Thompson has since passed away, and to be honest, I'm glad. History 3. Last summer, my friend Tim and I, along with his girlfriend Lisa and a couple of her friends, decided to take a trip down to Myrtle Beach for the day. It's a bustling seaside town on the East Coast, known for its lovely holiday spots. While it's mostly a beautiful place, large gatherings of people often bring out some unsavory characters. We were walking around the park when Lisa mentioned she and her friends wanted to check out the shopping center. She asked if we wanted to join, but Tim and I, who I'll call Mike, weren't too excited about that idea, so we said we'd catch up with them later. After parting ways, Mike and I quickly grew tired of the crowded park and decided to find a quieter spot. I wanted to smoke a joint before meeting back up with Lisa, so we headed to a nearby wooded area for some privacy. As soon as we got there, an uneasy feeling washed over me. We had gone from a bustling street to a silent, secluded forest, and it felt like we were being watched. Those shady characters I mentioned earlier could be lurking out here too. Ignoring my gut feeling, Mike and I searched for a good spot to light up. Once we settled down and started smoking, I couldn't shake off the anxious feeling. It only got worse as time passed. Suddenly I noticed movement among the trees. A tall, malnourished man in his mid-40s with greasy hair and missing teeth was approaching us. We immediately recognized him as a drug addict. The man shouted, "Have you boys seen bugs around here?" Mike and I exchanged confused glances and yelled back, "No man, no bugs here." The man then turned and ran off in the opposite direction. Mike joked. Just your average crackhead, I guess. But I couldn't laugh. My paranoia was growing, and I couldn't help but wonder how many more people might be out here. Not even a minute later, another man appeared, this time on a bicycle. He was clearly another addict. Through his few remaining teeth, he mumbled, "You guys here for the big thing?" Mike quickly replied, "No," trying to stay composed. I could tell he was just as tense as I was. The man shrugged and began to ride away, but suddenly stopped, turned around, and stared at us like we didn't belong there. While this was happening, I heard twigs snapping all around us. I looked around and saw more addicts emerging from the forest, their clothes torn, eyes bloodshot, stumbling toward us like a horde of zombies. I didn't have to say a word to Mike. We bolted back the way we came, my heart racing and adrenaline pumping. After what felt like 10 minutes, I was exhausted. We finally saw the entrance to the park, but I didn't feel any safer. I kept hearing footsteps behind us. Mike suddenly turned around and said, "Oh, I dropped my joint." He knelt down, frantically searching through the leaves. "Hey, just leave it. We need to get out of here before they catch up with us," I urged. "Just give me a second, man. Relax," he insisted. I looked up and saw figures emerging from the tree line in the distance, their angry moans filling the air as they staggered toward us. "Forget about the joint. I don't want to be eaten alive," I shouted. "What? Zombies, man! They're coming right for us!" I know it sounded irrational, but at that moment, I genuinely believed we were being pursued by a horde of the undead. I grabbed Mike and forced him to his feet. We managed to escape without a scratch or bite. The tweaker zombies didn't follow us beyond the park entrance and slowly disappeared back into the woods. We stayed around the park and eventually met back up with Lisa, telling her about the terrifying encounter. She thought it was hilarious. We can laugh about it now, but Mike and I were still shaken. I still wonder what those crackheads' intentions were and why they were there. My best guess is that we stumbled upon a big drug deal. Maybe the first guy we saw was the dealer, and once we scared him off, the others thought we were the new dealers. Or maybe it was something else entirely. I'll leave it to the imagination of the readers. One thing is for sure, I will never venture into unfamiliar territory again, especially while under the influence.